from Stamps Away. Stamps Away is a company that does all sorts of things, but one of the things we're known for is our masks and stencils. So in the next few minutes I'm going to show you lots of different things you can do with your masks and stencils. But first of all, I just wanted to explain what's the difference between a mask and a stencil. A lot of people get a bit muddled up with it. Essentially you can use them in very similar ways, but a mask is one like this, which is the design is the actual plastic, and so therefore you ink through and the mask protects or masks off the design. A stencil, you just ink through and you get the design. You'll see the difference as I'm doing the demonstrations in the next few minutes. Okay, so we've got a variety of ones, and we're going to do lots of basic things and some more involved things that we can do with them. But they're one of the most versatile tools you've got, so it's something that if you've got them in the back of the drawer, get them out and start playing with them. One of the nicest things you can do with them is you can actually emboss them through your embossing machine. So it doesn't matter what machine you've got, the important thing you need is your rubber mat. Yours will possibly be a little bit cleaner than mine. So I'm going to put a mask down. I then take a piece of paper, put it on top, and then you put your rubber embossing mat. That's the sandwich that you need to make sure that your mask can actually shape the paper. Then pop your top plate on and you're going to run it through. And this can be on any sorts of mediums. I've done it with tin cans, you know, like Coke cans sort of thing, because they're thin craft metal. You can do lots of things like that. You can use all your nice papers and cards. You don't want anything too thick because it would give too much resistance. I'm using a 200 GSM, which gives a nice crisp emboss. Okay, just move that out of the way. So you can see you've got that nice embossing there, nice crisp embossing, which obviously then, if you want to, you can come in with your inks and do a little bit of inking, which will highlight that embossing. So just going around using your distress inks and a sponge. You can blend colours together, all sorts of different things. It opens up lots of different things you can do. I'm going to come in with a bit of a green here. Blend colours together. And you can build this up. It makes fabulous backgrounds. Another thing you can do is emboss wax paper. And then when you iron it between two pieces of paper, you get a resist effect, which is really nice to work with as well. But it does require an iron, and I haven't got my iron with me today. So you can see just that lovely embossed detail. Obviously, being a mask or a stencil, you can, and this will show you the difference between masks and stencils really nicely, you can just pop it down and ink through. And I'm just holding it in place. You can hold it down with a bit of stencil tape if you want to, but I tend to just hold them. So if you see, if I lift that up, you can see the pattern is left behind, it's masked off. If I was to do this with a stencil, so this is a stencil, and then I ink through, you'll see the pattern is where the ink is this time. So that's the big difference. But let's say I want to have the pattern of this one. If I take a piece of card, I'm going to do a very quick inky background, so a little bit of director paper with my ink pad. Okay. So remembering a mask protects, so if I lay that on the top, it's going to protect that colour underneath. So if I now spritz that with water, count to 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Dab off the excess water and then remove. Now dry it. You can see the pattern. This mask has protected that colour and you're getting the pattern coming through. Gives a totally different look. Another way that you can work with these is if you apply the ink directly to the stencil or the mask. So just going on. Now you could spritz this with water and take an impression just by pressing it down, but as you've got your embossing machine, we can use it, and we use it in what's called a letterpress method. So basically it's using it like a printing press. So I'm just going to place a clean piece of paper on the top. You'll now realise why my mat gets so mucky. Put my mat on the top, pop it on, bring your machine back in, and we're going to run that through. So what it's doing now is it's transferring the ink from the mask to the paper using the pressure of the embossing machine. The plastic that the stencils are made from and the masks are made from is quite a clever material, and it keeps the ink wet for longer, so it gives you time to do things like this. It's also acid and solvent resistant, so you can use all your sorts of pastes and things like that with it. So there's the nice embossed side we've already seen. But if you look on this side, the ink has lifted off and been embedded in it. So this could be just coloured ink like I've used, or you could be using your embossing ink like your Versamark, and then that will allow you to put embossing powder on, which you can then heat and you would get that effect. But now I've got this, I'm going to build this up a little bit more, because this is what's nice with stencils and masks. There's so much more you can do with them. So I've just got a selection of distress inks here. It doesn't really matter what colours you have. You can go with all sorts of, just play around with the colours. It's that texture that we're using. So in we come. This is a very pale colour, but it will allow me to blend other colours over the top. So we're just coming in. Sorry about the squeaking. It means the ink's going down if it squeaks. That's just coming down. And again, this makes really nice backgrounds. And some designs you can extend over larger areas. Okay, just all the way around. Then we'll come in with another colour. Have a bit of dried marigold. Add a bit more warmth to it. You won't see a huge amount of difference, but you will get subtle changes. You get more depth of colour if you use multiple colours. Okay, so build that in. Now, because I've got those other colours there, I am going to come in with the green that I used in the background to begin with. And you see, even though that's the same colour, it's acting in a different way because of the colours underneath it. It's building up. And you can still see all that lovely impression and texture. So just going round. Okay, I'm going to come in with one last colour. Let's go with a bit of aged mahogany, just because I can. See, that will give it an immediate pop. The colours blending together. I'm not changing sponge because I've gone from lighter colours to darker colours, so I'm not worried about contaminating my ink pad, because I really want to work with these while the inks are still damp, because the colours blend together better. And for the last bit I want to do, I need to have the paper slightly damp, because I'm going to introduce a mica powder to it. Mica is a pigment that needs something to bind to. It has a binding agent in it that's activated by moisture. So as long as my ink is still wet, when I apply the mica powder, it will cling. So here's the mica powder. And I'm going to use a very soft blusher brush. Okay, and then I'm just going to work that in. And you can see where the moisture of the card grabs the mica powder. And then just use the brush to work that in and give it a little buff. Okay, so we've transformed a boring piece of white card into something that looks luscious. So we've got that one, we've got just plain embossed, we've got an inky background, we've just inked through them, and we can go on and on. So let's take this one. So this is quite a nice little little ruler effect. So we can just go very simply. So this is more of a stencil because I can just ink straight through, and you can see that we're getting that ruler effect. But also don't be afraid to move around. You don't have to have everything going the same direction. You don't have to use the whole design. So we're just coming in and creating a bit of a background here. And you can just create your own backgrounds. This is what's lovely about these. There is so much you can do with such a simple piece of plastic. And I haven't even got into using pastes and things. This is just using ink. So you see we've got a really nice, and then you could come in with something like this shattered one, and I'm going to choose a nice dark colour now. So it's going to look like it's actually broken up. So very simply, and this could be an embossing ink, and then you would put embossing powder on it as well to make it really pop. But we're just going to layer these on top. So working the sponge in. If you find that your sponge isn't getting into all the little gaps, if you've got a particularly detailed mask or stencil that you're working with and you're finding that the ink's just not going into the tiniest of gaps, if you emboss the design first, it lifts the card up to be level with the stencil or the mask, and it means that when you ink you're going to get all those details. This one's quite a bold design, so I don't need to worry about doing that. But then you've got that lovely shattered look. So last one we'll do. Let's have a little play with this one. And I'll do that to show you the difference by embossing it up first. And we might even do a little bit of shading. Now the important thing to remember when you're embossing, mask, card, paper, metal, whatever you fancy, embossing mat, top plate. It's that middle order that's important. The mask has to be at the bottom and the paper has to be between that and the embossing mat. Otherwise all you'll do is you'll just have a very, very faint impression. There's nothing to shape the paper around. Okay. So this is a really nice one because it gives you a tiled effect. This could be a patterned paper you're working on. I'm working on plain white paper, but you could be working on a patterned paper, you could be working on old book pages, you could be working on journal pages. Could even be fabric. Right, so I'm now going to flick that over. So that's also holds it in place a little bit more. So if you are unsure about working with ink and not taping it down, if you emboss it, it sort of helps it lock into place. So let's have a little play. See how much easier the ink fits into those gaps because it's raised it up. The other nice thing when you're working with stencils and masks is a lot's going on, but you don't necessarily get the impact until you remove the stencil at the end. So I'm just randomly, you could also, while it's like this, you could overstamp. Okay, blend a bit of colour in. And the nice thing is I'm not having to think too much about it. See, it wobbled a little bit, move it back into place. If you miss a bit, you can put it back on top. And this is the simplest way. So there is so much you could do. I'd need a whole YouTube channel just to show you the different things I can do with these. I say don't even get me started on when I start using pastes and filler and all sorts of things. But that is a good point. If you've used something on your stencil and or your mask, and you're really concerned that it's ever so mucky and you're never going to get it clean and you must rush and wash it straight away, you don't have to. Don't worry. What you do is when you've finally finished and you've got 5 minutes spare, all you do is you take your stencils or your masks, you get a baking tray, something flat because you want them to lay flat in the bottom, put in some really, really, really hot water, drop in a dishwasher tablet and leave them to soak. And then in about 10-15 minutes, depends how mucky they are, maybe an hour, then you lift them off, rinse them off, and they'll be clean as anything. So you're ready for a nice reveal. So you get your nice crisp edges and you get that lovely tiled effect. And if you wanted to impact that even more while it's still damp, if you put clear embossing powder over it, heat it up, that would look like individual tiles that you've stuck on lovingly. So this is just a real taster of all the things you can do, and hopefully I'll have a chance to show you some more ideas. Hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll get your masks and stencils out of the drawer and get using them.